Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Coming up on today's podcast, we have breaking news today that Cleveland Cavaliers have a new head coach. It's former New Jersey, I was going to say the New Jersey Nets, but of course, they're now the Brooklyn Nets. I'm dating myself with the New Jersey Nets. Former Brooklyn Nets head coach and most recently, Golden State Warriors assistant coach, Kenny Atkinson. What do we like about him? What do we not like about him? We'll break it all down with my pal Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com to discuss that breaking news. That's all coming up on today's edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers.
You're watching Adam the Bull on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, we are back. Brought to you by Bet Rivers, of course. And joining me now, Chris Fedor covers the Cavs for Cleveland.com. And for some reason, Chris, people were getting worked up how long it was taking to hire a coach, which I didn't understand because who were they competing against? Detroit just fired their coach, but there was really no competition and no need for rush, so I wasn't worried about it. I was surprised there was. Were you surprised that you heard people like, what's going on? I didn't think it was a big deal. But
no, not really, honestly.
Yeah.
If you have a situation like this where you fire a coach and you don't have somebody already lined up, Bull, where you're just going to go to him no matter what happens, which seemed to be the case for Phoenix when they got Mike Budenholzer immediately after firing Frank Vogel. These things take time. It took the Lakers a little bit more than a month. The Cavs 5 years ago, when they ended up with John Beilein, took about a month. And this one was about the same thing because you have to make so many calls. You have to schedule so many interviews, some of them over Zoom, some of them in person. The finalists that the Cavs met with were all 2-day type interviews with a dinner mixed in there. You've got to bring the owner into the process. I remember talking to a member of the Cavs front office during the early portion of the search bowl, and he said, Chris, I can't talk right now. I've got 40 or 50 people on my call list. Former players of some of these coaches, executives that worked with these guys, coaches that were on the same staff as these guys. There's just so much information that you have to gather because there are so many variables when it comes to a coaching search. And it's such an important decision that you don't want to rush this process. And like you said, They weren't competing with anybody for these candidates. The Lakers, if they weren't going to go with J.J. Redick, it was going to be Dan Hurley. Neither of those guys were on the Cavs' radar anyway. So they almost were able, based on the other teams that were looking for coaches, to take their time and do it the right way.
Chris, Kenny Atkinson is the man. The last two times the Cavs hired a coach, they were bizarre choices, right? I mean, David Blatt, bizarre choice, but waiting in the wings was Ty Lue, and he turned out to be the backup guy, but he was the great choice. Same thing happened again this time around, where the first choice, John Beilein, I don't know, and JB did a solid job. I'm not going to say he was good. He's not as good as Ty Lue, obviously, but he did certainly better than John Beilein. This time, they hire a guy that is highly credible around the league. And the first thing I think of, frankly, with him is when the Cavs made the Kyrie Irving trade, and we were all like, well, the Nets are going to have the best odds because they're the worst team. They stink. Yeah. And he made them a competitive team, and that has always stood out to me over the years about him. And I'm sure that was one of the many factors as to why he eventually got this job, right?
There's no doubt about it, Bull. I actually phrased it to somebody earlier today when I was having a conversation about this hire, and I look at it because I'm a golfer. I look at it as a short par 4, take iron, hit it in the middle of fairway, play to the middle of the green, see if you can make a putt for birdie, as opposed to going for the green off the tee and pulling driver. You know what I mean? It was a safe, logical, reasonable hire that the Cavs made. Because the situation that they're in right now requires something specific from a coach. This is a team that went to the Eastern Conference semifinals. This is a team that has made back-to-back playoff appearances. This is a team that's trying to take the next step. I don't think it required a first-time head coach. Are there success stories from other guys making that leap from assistant to head coach and having success immediately? Yes. But like I said, there's so many different variables involved. And they eliminated the variable of, can this guy do the job? Is this guy ready for the job? They have seen him be successful. He has head coaching experience. He's known for creative, innovative offenses. He's worked under Ty Lue, Steve Kerr, Mike Budenholzer, Mike D'Antoni, think about that roster of coaches, the
Yeah.
success that they've had over the last 10 to 15 years in the NBA, the knowledge that he has gained. He's worked in rebuild situations. He's worked along stars, Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, all these different things. And I think learning that over the years has prepared him for this situation here in Cleveland. And it did feel like from the very beginning, Bull, that the Cavs were looking for somebody with previous head coaching experience, somebody that is known for player development, given the importance of Evan Mobley to this team's future, and somebody that could get more out of this offense than what JB Bickerstaff could. And from that
Yeah.
standpoint, Kenny Atkinson checks enough of those boxes.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Sometimes you go for the unknown, and sometimes it pays off and it becomes a big story. But more often than not, the guy who's never coached before does not pan out. We don't discuss that when we want that,
Right.
but fans often want the unknown. The unknown's more exciting.
Yes.
But I am excited about Kenny Atkinson, and this is the most excited I've been about a Cavs coach hire in a long time, because I think they hired the right guy and a smart guy. And I like the fact, now we'll see what happens with Jarrett Allen. Obviously, we don't know for sure he's going to be here, but I was watching an interview today that of a couple minutes of Jarrett Allen. I'm sure you've seen it, with JJ Redick, who you mentioned before.
Yep.
And he talked about playing for Kenny Atkinson, and he spoke very highly of Kenny Atkinson, said it was a lot of fun to play for him. And then obviously once they got Kyrie and once they got Durant and DeAndre Jordan, the chemistry on that team changed, and they kind of wanted him out, and it didn't, and fell apart. But when this team was playing with a bunch of young guys, which this team has, they seemed to really like it, and they liked his leadership and his player development. So it does seem like a good fit from that perspective.
And the other thing is, the Cavs want to be more modern on the offensive end of the floor. If you look at his 4 years in Brooklyn, 3 of those 4 years, they finished in the top 5 in 3-point attempts. And each one of those years, they were top 10 in the NBA in pace. That's what this league is. It's pace and space. Yeah. It's bombing threes. It's finding a way to be more dynamic, creative, innovative on the offensive end of the floor. And some of the problems that some of the people inside this organization had with JB Bickerstaff, including the players, big reason why they lost belief and confidence in him is because they just didn't believe in the offense. They just didn't believe that it was dynamic enough. And that showed itself, Bull, in the playoffs against Orlando and Boston. They could barely score 100 points. They got Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, and for all of the questions about the fit of those guys and the spacing on the floor and do they take enough threes and the roster construction and all that kind of stuff, that's a lot of talent on the offensive end. Mixing Max Strus, mixing Karis LeVert, to struggle to score 100 points in a playoff environment 2 straight years, that's something that the Cavs believe needs to change. And obviously, Kenny Atkinson showed in Brooklyn, with lesser talent than what he's going to have here in Cleveland, that he could find a way to get more out of that group. So there's a belief with more talent here that he'll find a way to do it again with the Cavs. Like you said, time will tell. Yeah. It's very hard to predict these kinds of things, but it does seem like a logical fit for where this team is.
Yeah, and you look at player development, and there's Evan Mobley is staring right in the face, right? I mean, Evan Mobley, as a defensive player, he's where you want him to be. But as an offensive player, he's not reached close, I don't think, to where they thought his potential was. And he's kind of leveled off. And I think there was, I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting. I know a lot of guys were out by the time they got eliminated by Boston. But I thought right at the end of that series, he started to show some of the promise that we all thought he had. And I got excited about that. And I've been a little down on Mobley because I'm like, where is this offense? So my hope, and I'm sure everybody's hope, is that he can lead to this next step that we're hoping to get, because Evan Mobley's still obviously very young. He just turned 21 years old. It's not too late for him to develop into the player that they'd hope he'd be. And I guess that's what they're hoping, that Kenny Atkinson can help take his offensive game, not to be cliche, but to another level.
Bull, you were not the only person that was excited about that performance in the series against the Celtics.
Yeah.
It's game 5. Cavs are in the locker room. They're about to leave Boston. They had just lost the series against the Celtics. They're headed back home for an uncertain summer because obviously they've got the Donovan Mitchell situation that they've got to work
Yep.
out. They didn't know at that point what they were going to do with their coach, but everything felt like JB's job was in serious jeopardy. And they've got some roster decisions to make in terms of how these guys fit and whether they're going to stick around. Is the core four going to stay together? All that kind of stuff was out there at that time. It's the end of game
Yep.
5. Donovan Mitchell doesn't play in that game, but he's in the locker room. He goes up to Evan Mobley. He pounds him on the chest, right? And he says, "That's who you are. That's who you need to be." So Donovan Mitchell saw something in Evan Mobley in that series against the Celtics, including game 5, that was different, right? How the Cavs
Yeah.
used him was different. How he scored offensively was different. The confidence that he was playing with on that stage against that caliber opponent, that was different too. If that can carry over, if he can take another step offensively, then the Cavs' offensive ceiling gets raised organically without them having to make other
Right.
moves around the roster. And you know this,
Right.
Bull. This organization has been talking about Evan Mobley, calling him a unicorn, calling him a future Hall of Famer, saying that he's the
Yeah.
most important person in this organization for years to come. Ever since he was drafted 3rd overall in 2021, this offseason, they're going to present him with a $270 million rookie scale max extension because he's that
Yeah.
important to their future. And this was a big reason why they were attracted to Kenny Atkinson from the very beginning and why ultimately they went down the road of him, because player development, getting the most out of Evan Mobley, changes the direction of this organization. It changes whether they're going to get to the level of Boston and some of these other
Right.
teams, or if they're just going to be that next tier team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked a lot in a football vein of, the Browns are a good football team, but if Deshaun Watson could play like Houston
Yeah,
Deshaun, they're a Super Bowl
right.
team. If he plays like the way he's played the last couple of years, they're just a playoff team that's going to get eliminated. Same thing with the Cavs, right? If Evan Mobley can reach that level, that unicorn level, the Cavs are a championship contender. If he's just the player he is now, which is a fine player, they're not a championship contender, and that makes the difference. And I think what's going to be interesting this offseason is obviously you got to develop his game while still trying to win, right?
Yeah.
And do you decide ultimately, and I guess part of it depends on what's being offered, do you have to trade Jarrett Allen?
Right.
And it feels painful to trade Jarrett Allen because he's a great guy, it seems. I mean, you know him better than I. Seems like a great guy. And he played great for them. And do you trade Darius Garland? Do you change the mix of chemistry? I know it's tough to predict, but what are you expecting to happen this offseason? What's your best guess?
My best guess, Bull, is that Darius Garland and Jarrett Allen both stay, because
Okay.
there isn't going to be an offer out there that the Cavs are going to receive for either guy that they're going to be willing to say yes to. Because they're not in a situation where they have to be desperate. They're not in a
Right.
situation where
Fair.
they have to make a move just to make a move. This team has won 99 games over the last 2 years. For whatever you feel about the regular season and its importance, they've won 99 games over the last 2 years. They've been a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference the last 2 years. They just won their first playoff series without LeBron James in more than 3 decades. It's not the kind of season where they completely flamed out against the New York Knicks and they had to start overreacting. They had to overpay in free agency to fix their roster and stuff like that. They did good this year. I mean, they made the move that they feel like they needed to make by firing JB Bickerstaff and seeing if they could bring in a coach that could get more out of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. See if they could get more out of this offense, out of Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, work around some of the limitations of the offense. So I just think they're not panicking. They're not overreacting. And I find it hard to believe, Bull, that in this current marketplace, and things change in the NBA quickly, somebody could become available at the end of this cycle of free agency and trade activity and stuff, that, the Cavs feel like there's an opportunity out there and they're going to go explore that. It happens all the time in the NBA. But right now in this trade marketplace, I just don't think they're going to get the kind of offer for either guy that they're going to say, this is going to make us a clear-cut, better basketball team. And unless they see an offer like that, unless they're blown away for a deal for either one of those guys, I just don't see them pulling the trigger on that in the same offseason where they already made a pretty significant move by changing the coach.
Yeah, and I think by, not only maybe they won't get the trade they want, but there may just be a part of them, as you alluded to there, that says, you know what? Let's see if a more creative coach can get the best of these
Right.
guys, because we haven't, you're right, and I poo-poo the regular season, I admit
Mhm.
that. But I think last year, considering the injuries especially, I mean, I didn't expect, even if they were healthy, I didn't think they'd beat
Mhm.
Boston, let alone with all the injuries. So they went as far as I could have expected them, as opposed to the first year when they, lost that series in embarrassing fashion to the Knicks. But it's easy to say, well, Darius Garland certainly had his worst year last year,
Right.
and Evan Mobley hasn't reached what he's capable of. And so if I have the right coach,
Yeah.
maybe I do have the right team. I think a lot of us think they don't have the right team. The mix is
Right.
wrong. And that may be the
Maybe.
case. But maybe also with another coach, if he can get the best out of this group, then as we talked about earlier, the sky could be the limit.
Here's the other thing too, Bull. It is
Yep.
hard when you have young, talented, controllable players that want to be in the situation where they are and fit well enough to have some level of success, right? It's hard to move on from those kinds of guys. And I know
Right.
that no situation is the same, and I know that no two tandems are the same. But a number of years ago, everybody was saying that the Boston Jays weren't going to work. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they had
It's
overlapping
true.
skills, and they had to break those guys up. And look at them now. They evolved as players, and I think that's a variable that people cannot ignore here. Darius
That's
Garland can
fair.
get better. Evan Mobley
Yeah.
can get better. And if they correct some of their own flaws and they become more evolved players at both ends of the floor, then you're not having the same kinds of questions about fit with Donovan Mitchell or about fit with Jarrett Allen. Like if Evan Mobley
Yeah.
becomes a more polished and reliable outside shooter perimeter player, then all of a sudden you have the kind of player at both ends of the floor that you want alongside Jarrett
Sure.
Allen, that you want alongside Donovan Mitchell
Right.
for years to come. So you just can't ignore that fact. And it's really, really hard in today's NBA, Bull, to give up on that level of talent. It is.
That's fair.
Because you know that, or you believe that what you get back, like, how do you know that that's going to work better? There's
You don't?
you just don't.
No,
So it's a
you
big
don't.
risk to take. And I just don't think the Cavs are in position where they want to take that risk unless
Yeah.
there is a clear cut better option out there
Sure.
that they think is a no brainer type move.
Yeah, and what's funny, and everything's relative, but Jarrett Allen is kind of cheap at this
He
point.
is.
For $20 million a
Oh,
year,
yeah.
as good as he's been. I'll tell you, when they got Jarrett Allen, I was like, well, he's a good player.
Right.
Like and I thought he had already reached the ceiling, and his ceiling keeps going
It
up.
does.
Not a huge amount every year, but a little bit each year. I'm surprised that he kept having more levels to his game. Obviously, you need and it's got to be Mobley probably, but
Mhm.
that's the only flaw is that neither one right now can shoot from the outside. But
Right.
he has progressed as a player, and that's been impressive to see.
He has. If you think about it, Jarrett, everybody was killing him after that series against the Knicks. Oh,
Oh my God!
he got pulverized by Mitchell
Yeah,
Robinson, and he's not tough enough, and he's not physical
yeah,
enough, and he can't rebound, and he can't do this, and he can't do this. So then this past offseason, away from the cameras, out of the spotlight,
yeah,
just the way that he likes it, he becomes a better player. He's stronger, he's
yeah,
more physical. He got better in terms of adding a face up jumper to his offensive arsenal. He became a better
yeah,
passer. He had a great year for
yeah.
the Cavs. I put him on my
He
second
did.
team all defensive team. There were people that were
Yeah,
wondering if he was going to make the all star team once again. That was the kind of year that he had. That was the kind of impact that he had for the Cavs. And the other thing is, well, there are people inside this front office that were responsible for bringing Jarrett here that believe that the trajectory of this organization changed the minute that he was brought here. He gave them a direction,
it's
he
fair.
gave them an identity. So going away from him, seeing how much success that he has had is going to be hard for this organization, especially coming off the
Yeah,
year that he had, especially correcting some of the weaknesses that he showed against the Knicks in last year's playoffs. And when it comes to
right.
Darius, if the Cavs were to go down that road, they would be trading him maybe at his lowest, did not have a good year, not in the regular
That's true.
season, not in the playoffs, dealt with a bunch of injuries, has a massive contract that any team would have to take on. So you're not talking about Darius Garland at his peak value. You're talking about other teams that feel like they can take advantage of the situation because of the year that he is coming off of. And that's never the time that you want to trade away a player like that.
Chris, let's wrap it up with this. Let's say you're right, and they stick with the core four. You want it, and obviously you hope there's improvement within the core four, sure. But there's going to be moves you're going to try to make on the edges with the rest of the roster, right?
Yeah.
Is there a guy you have in mind, either via trade, free agency, even I'm not talking about a star, maybe just a guy who'd be an interesting fit for this team that you have your eye on yet, or have you just not dove down that road enough yet?
No, I've gone down that road. I feel like I have to. I feel like I have to be forward thinking, especially if they don't make a significant move to alter the roster. Look, if they're going to make a significant move, I think everybody understands the names, right? Brandon Ingram, Kevin Durant, if the owners can end their beef.
Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler. Like those types of players are the significant ones where you have to use either Jarrett or Darius as the centerpiece of OG Anunoby if things don't work out for him with the Knicks. Paul George. Like those are the ones that significantly change the complexion of this team. But that's obviously going to cost you either Darius or Jarrett. The other ones that are like around the margin type guys, I think Harrison Barnes is interesting for this team.
You've always loved him. You've loved him forever.
He can play the 3 or the 4. He's got playoff experience. He's more of a win now type player. And again, a lot of this comes down to cost, right? And do the Cavs have the kinds of assets to make these deals work, to appeal to the team that would be trading these guys? Cam Johnson from the Brooklyn Nets is somebody that the Cavs have had on their radar since the draft a number of years ago. I think he makes a lot of sense from a Cavs perspective. Keldon Johnson of the San Antonio Spurs is a logical fit for the Cavs as well. I'd keep an eye on Jeremy Grant from the Portland Trailblazers, somebody that the Cavs tried to take a run at in free agency a number of years ago. Like those are the kinds of guys. I think they need somebody that can fill minutes at the 3/4 spot Bull. Give them a little bit more depth, a little bit more lineup versatility. If they are going to play Evan Mobley at the 5 a little bit more than what they have, then they need a floor spacing forward. That's why I bring up Kyle Kuzma, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Grant. Like one of those kinds of guys, I think should be Cam Johnson. I think one of those guys is and should be on the Cavs' radar this offseason.
I told you 15 minutes. We're already up to 22, but now I got to ask you one more thing because I got to ask you about the draft before you get out of here.
I've got time.
Thank you. I know it's the 20th pick in the draft.
Yeah.
By all accounts, this is the worst draft we've seen in a long time. However, the one good thing about it, according to the guys that I know, like you, who know basketball, my man Mikey McNuggets, he said the one interesting thing about being 20th in this draft is that the guy you get draft 20th might be just as good, if not better, than the guy drafted 5th because there's not a huge differential in talent, or there's a big difference in opinion on who's really good in this draft or not. So there may be some interesting guys that can help.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you have your eye on, and who do you think the Cavs have their eye on with that pick? Or could they move around in the draft?
So the other thing that is pretty complicated about this draft, Bull, is that there is a belief that somebody who could be in play for one team in the lottery could also drop between the 20s.
Right.
So,
crazy.
Could the Cavs be in a position where they take advantage of a guy slipping and they end that draft night fall? Johnny Furphy from Kansas is somebody that the Cavs like, that has worked out for the team. He is from Australia. He spent 1 year at Kansas, kind of like a 3-and-D type player. Tristan Da Silva from Colorado is another player on their radar. I do know that the Cavs like Zach Edey if he is available at number 20.
What is he, 7'4"?
7'4" from Purdue, one of the best college players of the last decade, basically. There are legitimate questions about how does he hold up in today's NBA, right? And does does the things that make him special in college, do those translate to the NBA level? And I get all those questions, but he's definitely
Yeah.
on the Cavs radar, and there are multiple
Yeah.
people in this organization that like him. Kyle Filipowski from Duke, who became the seventh
Okay.
Duke player in the last 50 years to score 1,000 points in their first 2 seasons in college. He's intriguing. He's somebody that the Cavs are
Okay.
looking at. Carlton Carrington of Pitt is somebody that is on their radar as well. So they have a bunch of different guys that have worked out through this process, a
Yeah.
bunch of different guys that are on their radar. I don't think it's going to be a high level impact guy from day one. I just don't think they're going to get that in the draft
Sure.
at 20 for a team that is coming off an Eastern Conference semifinals appearance. But if they can improve like guy number 10, 11,
Sure.
12 in this rotation, I certainly think there's value there.
No doubt. And it might, with the way injuries go, especially in the regular season, if you're the 10th guy on the team, or even if you're the 12th
Yeah.
guy on the team, there's enough injuries, you're going to get some run during the season. And then we see, hey, maybe this guy's got something. So
And then the fans are going to just keep calling for that guy to get more and more and more and more and more run, and more and
and no
more playing
fan
time.
base does that better than Cleveland fan base. We are the kings of wanting especially when it's a little white dude. We love the little white dude. That's a scrappy hard worker.
Yes.
First guy in, last guy out. We love that guy.
That's right.
Chris, great stuff, man. I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining me.
You got it, Bull. Anytime, man.
All right, always great stuff talking with Chris. And like I said with Chris, Kenny Atkinson, I love the job he did in Brooklyn. You look at the litany of great coaches he's worked under. I think this guy's a good hire, and it will be interesting. I've been down on the idea of the Cavs standing pat, but I am intrigued about the possibility of these 4 guys playing for a new, more creative coach. I think it's going to be fascinating. Folks, if you're not using the Bet Rivers app, what are you doing? Get on it. You can start betting on football already, soccer. All the soccer stuff is going on right now. People are going crazy with soccer betting. Tennis. Nobody does it better for tennis. Of course, baseball. I'll have a parlay for you on Tuesday. A lot going on. Thanks to Monzo for producing. Thanks to Chris Fedor for joining me. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. Make sure you hit the subscribe. Make sure you hit the like. We'll talk to you next time. Where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by Bet Rivers. See you, everybody.